From Built It Productions, it's The Great Creators. Conversations about creativity with some of the most celebrated actors, musicians, and performers of our time. I'm Guy Raz, and on the show today, country music superstar Shania Twain, and how some of her most upbeat, cheerful hits start with sadness.
Sometimes I'm initially drawing from feeling melancholy or reflecting on something hurtful in my life. I often take those songs and turn them around to cheer myself up. It's like this self-help exercise. I'm just like, okay, enough of that. Let's get happy and let's see the positive side of this.
Shania Twain is the best-selling female country artist of all time. More than 100 million records. Her 1997 album, Come On Over, is the 7th best-selling record ever. Shania is often called the Queen of Country Pop, with 5 Grammy Awards and massive hits like Man, I Feel Like a Woman and You're Still the One. She grew up inspired by singers like Dolly Parton and Linda Ronstadt and has become an inspiration herself for a new generation of stars like Taylor Swift and Carrie Underwood. In this episode of the show, you'll hear how, as a kid, Shania used her voice to climb her way out of poverty by singing to drunk crowds at local bars. How, as a woman from Canada, Shania had to make some bold moves to break into the male-dominated world of country music in Nashville. You'll also hear how Shania the songwriter became Shania the performer by overcoming her fears of being on stage, and how, after she almost lost her singing ability to Lyme disease, Shania is now back with a new album, Queen of Me. It's all coming up after this quick break. Before Shania Twain was the Shania Twain, she was actually born Eileen Edwards. Her parents divorced when she was 2, and her mother moved the family to the remote rural town of Timmins, Ontario. Eileen's mother eventually married Jerry Twain, who adopted her children and changed their last name to Twain. But at home, Eileen's life was rough. Her stepfather was violent and abusive, and there often wasn't enough money or food. But Eileen had a reason to be hopeful. She could sing really well.
My mother caught me or heard me or overheard me singing harmony to nursery rhymes, harmony to
Wow.
I Had a Little Lamb.
Wow.
And, very young. I was 3 years old. And I remember very well, even now, just that sensation of resonance in my face, in my tongue, my teeth, my lips, my nose, all this area where we resonate sonically and with our voice. So, not that I would have at that age ever, understood that it was a singing ability or anything like that. But for an adult, for my mother, she definitely knew, well, okay, she's not even singing the melody. She's singing something that is blending beautifully with the melody. And when I was in the car was mostly where we listened to music.
Yeah.
And that, I think a lot of small town Canadians do because we're always traveling the road so much. It's always 30 minutes here, a few hours there. It's nothing is just around the corner normally. So we do spend a lot of time listening to music. And I always gravitated toward the more melodic music of the Carpenters, and I loved the Bee Gees. I loved Mamas and the Papas. Of course, Dolly Parton she always had great, more bluegrassy harmonies in a lot of her music. And so I just loved harmony, and it was obvious to my mother that I was musical.
You've talked about, and anyone who knows a bit about you knows that your upbringing was not easy. You grew up in a home where money was scarce, and there was a lot of conflict and even violence. Was singing an escape for you from what was going on at home?
I think I did learn, or I guess I discovered that music would be a great escape for me starting from very young. So every time I would be uncomfortable, and still to this day, if I feel the need to escape for a little while, I go straight to songwriting. So it's been my go-to from a very young age, that anytime I need some sort of escapism or self-help therapy, now is kind of what I look at it as, I go to songwriting because I just open up my imagination and I go somewhere else.
You've talked about how you were sort of this hope, the hope from your mom and dad. You were their hope, but obviously you were in this tiny town in rural Ontario, 5 kids, no money. You were a precocious kid singing in bars to grown, half-drunk men, but it seems like they had a vision or a plan for you, that they thought maybe you might make it. I mean, did they, or what do you think when you say you were the kind of their hope? What do you think their hope was for you?
Well, my mother particularly seemed to understand and had conviction that I was going to make it. I didn't know really what that meant, making it. When you're a little kid, you don't really know what that is. You don't even know what a career is. But when my mother would she would call people on the phone, and she was acting a lot like my agent, and would, reach out to whoever she could, promoters, bands coming into town. She would talk to bar owners and management to try to get me in there. And so when I'd hear her talking about me, she would talk about me as if I was going to be the next sensation. And she really believed it. She spoke with conviction and was very committed to that. And a lot of what my parents fought over were my mother running up the phone bill. And doing her job, what she thought was her job, to get me out there and recognized and noticed and get me opportunities. So all the calls to, for example, getting me on the Tommy Hunter show would have been long distance calls.
Wow.
And her promoting me.
There are videos of you just so sweet as a little girl, with your gap-tooth smile, performing on Canadian television in the late 70s and in 1980, the Tommy Hunter show, singing Jolene and other country songs. How did you manage that as a kid? Were you, I mean, I've seen you in so many interviews, and your private persona actually seems quite introverted, even though you are a performer and you're out in the world. How did you manage that, being out there on stage as a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid?
I was always really uncomfortable being on stage. I think getting in front of, most of my earliest stages were in the bars where I could only get in after midnight. So naturally, the clientele were already pretty, wasted and non, they weren't really, it was hard to keep them focused. And it was just awkward for any little kid. That would be awkward. And all the smoking and the smells. It was just a weird, if I think of all the sensory, like the offensive sensory exposure to that age would have been pretty intense. So I learned quickly to smile through it, to be the entertainer, to be a professional, even when I was uncomfortable. And that was the stage where I really developed the stage fright. I didn't want to be on stage. And I never, ever got used to it until... I don't think I ever really got used to it or ever overcame it until very recently, because I learned to manage it better as I went, but it was always petrifying for me.
It's interesting because, and I mean, this is a bit of a stereotype, but I think in general, Canadian culture is more modest than American culture. In other words, in the United States, kids are sort of grow up to believe that they can be the president or they can be anything. And I think in Canada, it's a little bit different, where being ambitious or sort of having a big dream or vision is, you kind of don't really talk about that so much. And I wonder how you, as a 17, 18-year-old kid who was, you were in the high school, you sang in high school and played instruments, and you'd done some television appearances and you were performing. Did you feel ambitious? Did you feel like, I'm going to make it, I'm going to be this huge international star?
No, I didn't even tell my friends in school that I was a singer. And I I was hoping no one would see me on the Tommy Hunter show, because now I'm in grade 10, I think, at this time. I'm early teens. And I remember I went to the principal and said, I'm going to have to miss a couple of days of school. I got to go to Toronto. Whenever I had anything like that, I'd have to take a day or so off school. And I'd always say, please don't tell anyone else, because I don't want anyone to watch. I was really, really self-conscious about it. It's not that I didn't recognize that it was probably my destiny, but I was afraid of the spotlight. I didn't like being on the spot. I was the music maker, not the spotlight performer.
Yeah.
And they're very different skills and very different talents.
When you were in your early 20s, I think 21, you moved to Toronto, and then you were still known as Eileen, and you moved there and you started to perform. What was take me back to what was in your head about what you were going to do with your life? Did you think that you would just find work as a singer? I know you were also waiting tables and doing other things, but did you think that was what you would do?
I didn't really know how to go about success at all. I just knew that at this point, all my friends are now gone to college.
Yeah.
And the only skills I have are in music.
Yeah.
And they're limited because I haven't had any formal training. So I wanted to do jingles, but I couldn't because my voice was very adaptable. I could sing anything. Always had a great range, like a very impressive range, very chameleon skills from doing top 40 all my life of every genre. And then, so I'm like, okay, I could get it. Jingle singers make great money, but I didn't have good enough sight reading skills. So couldn't do that. So I cleaned houses. I worked at McDonald's. I worked in a denim shop, did all kinds of odd jobs. And then at night, I would get jobs singing with bands that got gigs that required female singers. There were a lot of bands without female singers, but there were certain bars that required a female singer. It was something to do with the clientele and keeping I don't know what it was. But so I had a repertoire that I could just hop in with a band for a week and be their female lead singer that week.
This is obviously a time before YouTube, before you could just put yourself on YouTube and sing. And in some ways, it's easier to get discovered today. In some ways, it's harder because there's so many more people out there vying for it. But, I mean, here you were, a totally unknown singer, also working to pay rent in Toronto in your early 20s. And do you ever remember anybody coming up to you? And I know that there were a few people who kind of took an interest in you. Mary Bailey, who was a Canadian singer. But do you ever remember somebody coming up to you at that time and saying, Eileen, you have something that is different. Like, you can actually be a massive star. I mean, did anybody ever say anything like that to you at that time?
No one ever said, I think you could be a massive star. There was one vocal teacher that was very kind, Ian Garrett. He worked for the conservatory in Toronto, the Royal Conservatory, and he took me on as a student for a little while if I would clean his house. So that was our exchange. So I'd clean his house. He would give me voice lessons, more classical type voice lessons. He really thought I was very talented. I had a naturally wide range without any training. And I had a really excellent ear for pitch and everything like that. So he was telling me that, pursue a more formal route with your talent, and that's the only way, that someone like him would be able to guide me through. So, but as far as like any kind of popular genres, no, there was no access to anyone outside of just working the bar circuit.
Wow. I read that at this point in your career, in the mid-'80s, you really did not want to do country music anymore. That's not what you wanted to do. You wanted to figure out how to become a pop singer or rock singer. Why? What was it? What do you remember about that time?
Well, I had honed, so my songwriting skills, I would give credit to my country music youth. I mean, they were my songwriting teachers, all of these great writers, Chris Christopherson and Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson. I mean, they were extraordinary songwriters. So that's all I listened to when I was a kid. But by the time I was in my teens, even in my tweens, I was really catching on to the Eagles, and the Rumors album was really big. And Linda Ronstadt was very much a country pop star, so she influenced me a lot because she was very much in the country world, country, folk, pop, and rock. She was a good example of what I thought more where I fit, which was a little bit of all of those things. She was a really good example, actually. And then Dolly Parton had some pop hits as well, all of a sudden. She had Islands in the Stream, and she had 9 to 5. Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, this is really more relatable to me. And the top 40 now in the bar scene had changed. It wasn't country anymore. It was top 40 pop and rocks, and that varied. So it could have been more like leaning toward R&B or leaning toward rock, but it was all the top 40. Yeah. So this was what I did for a paycheck. So I was now into my top 40 repertoire, and my vocal style was perfect for it. It was really where my voice agility was, and tonally, I thought that was really more where I was comfortable, rocking out and, being sassy and punchy, and that is just what I enjoyed singing. So the songwriting, definitely more in the folk country realm, singer-songwriter, no doubt, and it's never changed.
Yeah. I'm sure at some point there will be, and maybe it's even in the works, a film about your life. I mean, a dramatized feature, because it is. So many things are so implausible. I mean, you were 21 or 22 when your parents were tragically killed in a car accident, and you had to go back, or you decided to go back to take care of your siblings who were back in Timmins, and that probably would have been the end of your dream to, become a musician. I mean, you had to now take care of these humans. Do you remember feeling like, any dream you had of making it as a singer was kind of out the window at that point?
When my parents died, I almost felt a relief of not needing to be a singer anymore in the spotlight.
Wow.
I wanted to always sing and write for myself, which I would have definitely continued to pursue as a songwriting career, for sure. Because music, that's my passion. But to be in the spotlight, no. That was, my mother worked hard to develop those skills in me, and would have been devastated if I'd stopped. What I was facing, though, is that when my parents died, I didn't have any other skills.
Yeah.
And so I would have had to start over in that decision of what I was going to do with my life. But how was I going to do much with my life when I needed to get back to the kids? So it was a big, big dilemma. And I called up my friend Mary Bailey, who said, don't quit singing. You can earn a check. There's this place I know of that pays well. It's very different from what you do, but it's still singing. And you can work on your songwriting and your demos on the side, but still get paid with the skills you already have. So I moved my family to Huntsville.
Is Huntsville, Ontario in Canada?
Huntsville, Ontario. Mm-hmm. And that's very far south from my family. We'd never ventured out there. Just culturally very different. I know it probably sounds weird because it's still Canada and it's still Ontario, but it's a whole new thing when you're from Timmins, Ontario.
Sure.
We didn't have all these big streets and stuff like that.
Yeah. And this job you got, it was at a resort. It was like basically a resort on a lake, and you were the evening entertainment.
Exactly. So I learned how to walk in high heel shoes. I learned how to wear fitted clothing, glamorous clothing, how to style my hair and use hairspray, and how to put on foundation and lipstick and all of those things that were very new to me. Learned a lot about production.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about that there was a spotlight, and that the spotlight moved, and that there were marks on the stage. There was a thing called staging, and you had to be on cue, and all of these things that I had never even. I was just a freestyle top 40 bar singer as a by
singing cover
at that
songs.
point.
Yeah.
So, cover songs. Yeah. And now I was still singing cover songs at Deerhurst, but I was working on I was writing and demoing my songs at night after shows. So by the time I was introduced to a Nashville producer and lawyer that were willing to shop my songs to a record label, I had a nice collection of songs.
Yeah. How did you feel about, country music is so, obviously it's different today. There are many successful Canadian country singers, but when you kind of enter that world, right, that sort of auditioning in front of record executives from Nashville, country music was very much a sort of Southern, Western American genre. And here you were, this Canadian woman trying to show that you had what it takes. Was any part of you nervous about that? About sort of, I don't know, maybe coming across inauthentic or not country enough or something like that?
I think the fact that I was naive, I didn't know what I was up against. I didn't know that it was an issue that I wasn't Southern, or that I was a very, what I would consider a contemporary female, and that I was really writing songs and things that were more progressive as a country artist, because I was already so well into pop.
Yeah.
My roots were country, but knowing Dolly Parton, has these pop hits and international hits, and that Olivia Newton-John had crossed over into country, and there were quite a few females that were just on that line.
Yeah.
And I thought, but that was earlier on, okay? So then when I get to Nashville, they've actually regressed. They don't want a crossover hybrid sounding song or vocal style. So I'm like, whatever happened to, so many of my favorite influential females that were more liberating and outgoing about so many things. So that was different. I was disappointed that was the case. And I wasn't country enough. So it was harder than I was expecting.
When we come back after a quick break, Eileen Twain becomes Shania Twain, and a controversial music video for her song, What Made You Say That?, shakes up the world of country music. Stay with us. I'm Guy Raz, and you're listening to The Great Creators. Welcome back to The Great Creators. So it's the early 1990s, and Eileen has just moved from Ontario to Nashville to try to make it as a singer-songwriter. And after shopping around her catalog of songs, she signs with Mercury Records as Shania Twain.
You entered this country music has changed so much, and a lot of people attribute that to you and what you were able to do by pushing boundaries. From what I gather, you didn't think of yourself as a boundary pusher. The country kind of culture was quite conservative. Women singers were expected to kind of be chaste, and here you wanted to, you wanted to sing about different things, and you wanted to dress in a different way. And did you feel like you were consciously challenging that culture, or were you just kind of like, well, this is who I am?
In the beginning, I was not aware of it. It was quite interesting because, like I said, you look at Linda Ronstadt, this beautiful woman, she wore short shorts and was very accepted in the country world as she was in the pop and rock world. Same thing with Dolly Parton. She was always very forward with her figure, her beautiful figure, and accentuated it in her styling and all that. So I'm like, I didn't realize the limits were set differently now all of a sudden. So when I went in to make the What Made You Say That video, I didn't tell them my plan on the way I was going to dress for that video.
Yeah.
So visually, I wasn't even aware that I was going to be, that I was making something that would be controversial.
Yeah.
So it was just me and this Canadian director, Stephen Goldman. So he operated all the cameras, and I was my own stylist. And I just went shopping at the local whatever Target or something that was within the budget, which was very little. And I bought the things I wanted to wear. And I wanted it to be midriff. It was a very summery video, and we talked about I wanted the beach. I wanted to roll around with a guy.
Yeah, this hunky guy with these rippling muscles.
Yeah, but I really was just being my creative self.
Yeah,
I had
right.
no idea that this was going to, when I brought this back to the label, that they were going to go, oh my God, what are we going to do with this?
Yeah.
And I edited it, and I can't even tell you, man. I'm braless in the white dress. It was they were so surprised. They didn't want to offend me, but they're like, I don't think that we're going to get this played.
Huh.
But it was a very big success, the video.
Yeah.
And so they understood to trust me more and to allow me to be involved in that creative direction right from there.
That first debut album did not do as well as, it still did well, but not a sort of a home run, right?
No.
And there was even a possibility that you were going to be one and done. There's a huge graveyard of artists who get hyped or come out to Nashville or LA or wherever, and they make an album and that's it. They're done.
Definitely.
And that could have happened to you. You were not that far from that. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility that the label might have dropped you.
Well, don't forget, I was pulled in with the triple play, so that there were two guys and one girl, and I get the concept was in the favor of the label because, of course, if one sticks, great. Then we've achieved something, and then there was Billy Ray Cyrus that was exploding on the same label at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was a lot for one label to ask as far as like radio exposure from one roster. They had two big successes in a very short time, which were Billy Ray Cyrus and Toby Keith. So, and they were big songs, like really big. So
you were kind of buried between, these huge names at the time.
Totally. So it was either you come up with some songwriting that we think is, worth investing in recording, or this could be the end. So while that's happening, I get a call from Mutt Lange, and he wants to know if I'm a writer.
And Mutt Lange, some people know, he was a producer. He had produced AC/DC's Back in Black. He'd produced Def Leppard. And he just reaches out to you randomly because he had been familiar with your record and said, hey, I think you have something and maybe we work together? Like, it just came out of nowhere?
He felt that I sounded like Karen Carpenter, which he thought was a very rare quality. And then the fact that I was able to sing him my songwriting got him very interested and very intrigued. So I couldn't tell my label yet because I was worried that if now all of a sudden this rock producer is interested in making a record with me, that that could throw me out.
Yeah.
For sure. Because I'm already not country enough for them. How is this ever going to work? So what we decided was, let's just write the album and record it and then bring it to the label and see what they say. But I couldn't put the label head off that long. So I had to have a meeting with him, with Luke Lewis. And I said, listen, because he's like, if you don't play me something that blows us away, you probably are going to be dropped. So I said, okay, well, I have a confession. I'm working with a rock producer, and what can I say? I don't know. You're either going to love it or hate it. And when I told him who it was, he was so happy. He was ready to take on the challenge of facing, the A&R department, who were going to probably advise him that was going too far. And he had to work very hard with the country music associations to not boycott me.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. It was very controversial. I was already controversial in my visual direction. And now you add the AC/DC producer to it, forget it. So he was very brave and stuck with it. And thankfully, we had the first song that radio sort of accepted to play was Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under? I remember going into the stations, and I had to go to hundreds of them, and the door-to-door play 3 songs, and I played, my favorite one to play to them was Any Man of Mine.
Yeah.
But there was no way they were going to play that first. And a lot of them said, no way, we're never going to play that one. But Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under was palatable to enough of them.
Yeah.
That once the audience heard it, that was it. There was no turning back.
That began a really important creative partnership between you and Mutt Lange that would last, obviously, many years. A professional partnership and a personal one. The two of you obviously got married. There's a clip of an interview you gave at the time. I think you said, in the last 6 months, we wrote an album, we recorded all the songs, we released it. Oh, and we got engaged and married. I mean, that must have just been just a crazy time in your life, both exhilarating, but also just overwhelming.
Well, we both felt that we had landed somewhere we belonged as creatives, for sure. And we were just on the same page on so many levels. And songwriting is especially if you're like a one-on-one kind of songwriter, and I usually just write on my own, and so does he. So to let someone into that, what is normally a very solitary time and space.
Yeah.
Is already intimate, and we just gelled so well. We loved all the same music. We were very compatible as creatives, and our personalities were just all about music. We were both just very intense. We were very hard workers. There was no day, there was no night, there was no weekends. It was just obsessing about music, which is who I am.
Yeah.
So I met my match in that way. I've never met anyone so intense about it. And anyone I've ever worked with since always says, whoa, you are so intense and you are so tireless. I'm always the last man standing when it comes to creating music. So he was the first person, and the only one since, really, that I can say had that creative stamina, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about the right partnership, right? You think of Lennon and McCartney and on, of two people who come together and they can produce things that are just magical, that there's something about what both of them bring to the table. And I wonder how the two of you, you mentioned that both of you had been songwriters working alone, in isolation. So when you wrote music together, how did you do it? How did the process go?
Well, we still wrote apart a lot. And that's what I still do. The Queen of Me album was written, I wrote that, I was in solitary, writing for a year and a half at least. And it wasn't until the very end that we were able to get together in any group form with musicians and, actually bring it to any kind of production and add any writing components that might have been needed. That was all at the roundup stage, like really at the roundup stage. So I still will always write like that. I love to be solitary when I write, isolated. And so the two of us would write often on our own. And then we would come together and share what we did.
Yeah.
I've got this, I've got that. And then we would soundboard each other, and then we would go away again and work again. So we never really wrote much ever from scratch that we just sat down together and co-wrote. Mutt is more of he's an actual really excellent musician. So, which I just accompany my guitar is just my friend when I'm writing. I'm not an instrumentalist. So he would write more in the end, writing like music hooks and grooves and stuff like that. And then I would be writing lyrics and melodies, and then we would try combining them, and we would adjust and that sort of thing. So we were more, and we're still very individual writers. We write, he doesn't. I know, he spends a lot of time writing on his own, and as do I.
That record went on to sell 20 million copies, and you had a fan base by that point, a small fan base, but that record just catapulted you into certainly country music stardom. Not too long after that, I think it was John Landau who became your manager, and he recounted how you had met with him and said, look, I think I want to be an international singer. I want to tour. I want to be really successful. Do you remember how you got to that mindset, how you decided that was what you wanted to do?
I started to see, there was a conversation that I had with the record label, Luke Lewis again, and he just called me up and he said, how many albums do you think you've sold on The Woman in Me? And I said, I don't know. Like, Reba McEntire was my reference.
Yeah.
And so I said, I don't know. She sold, on her biggest album, 300,000. So, I don't know, 30,000 as a newcomer? And he's like, no, at this point, 3 million.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay. Wow. At that point, I started realizing the potential, and it gave me confidence in the possibilities, and my imagination started having some fun. And I thought, well, I've come this far. I've worked so hard, and I think there's no point being limited. Like, what are the limitations anyway? I mean, are there any limitations? And I started seeing past all of that and realized that, well, just because I'm a country music artist doesn't mean that it has to stay in America. Dolly didn't stay in America.
Yeah.
She is worldwide known. So, of course, my childhood self, very much inspired by Dolly Parton, there were no limits. I'm like, yeah, I can do this without abandoning who I am as a songwriter. I don't have to become something I'm not to achieve it.
Come On Over, which was the record that you released, the subsequent album that catapulted you into global stardom. Obviously, with the song "You're Still the One," "Man, I Feel Like a Woman." There's so many singles off that record, and you really became enormously famous, recognized everywhere you went, massive crowds wherever you appeared. And I'm curious about your public persona and your private persona and how you navigated those two things, because in any situation like that, there's an element of being a performer. You've got to be Shania Twain for the public, right? But then you can't be Shania Twain like at home at night when you're like reading a book on your sofa, or like you're hanging out with your partner or whatever, or just watching a movie. Like, you have to turn that off too. So how did you find the charisma you needed to become that person?
Well, it's not really about charisma. I mean, I'm always the same person, whether I'm on stage or not. But it's true that you're not always in your best frame of mind. You don't always feel like smiling and laughing. You don't always feel energetic. Maybe you're not feeling well even, and you got to get out there and do it. And this is really about being committed to the people that are there for you and to hear your music that you made for. It's about being able to exercise mind over matter, because the show must go on. It's about being a professional. And you've got to put all of your own personal self now aside and get out there and do what you came to do, no matter what. And that's what it is. Any performer has to know that, or I think should. I think the only ones that last are the ones that really can respect that.
You know, in many interviews that I've done on this show and in other shows I do, and I just thought so surprising that people who operate at the top of their profession often have imposter syndrome and a lot of self-doubt. And I wonder if you, as you were kind of beginning to really experience global stardom, right? And here you were just 10 years before that, you know, living in a tiny town in Canada, and not too long before that in a smaller town. Did you ever experience self-doubt? Did you ever have moments where you were like, I don't know if I can do this, if I can live up to this?
Well, the stage fright always came from being intimidated by the environment, which, obviously was in an adult bar, smoky, alcohol, soaked carpet environment. And then I started just feeling, as I grew and started performing, I felt the pressure of being excellent, my best.
Yeah.
And now I'm getting really paid for this stuff. I'm under contract. I'm obligated to be, in my mind, perfect, So the anxiety really grew because you're never perfect live. It's impossible. Nobody is perfect live. And there's so many variables. There's so many elements involved. And so when I would hear myself back, I would be, like I just can't even hear myself back. I hate it, because I pick out every fault. And that's also part of making records. Making records and then trying to live up to the recordings is really hard. They're different skill sets, they're different environments. So this weighed on me, and I never really shook the stage fright and that pressure. The crisis with my voice is the only thing that just made me realize, wow, okay, you got to get your priorities straight and realize that you are never going to be perfect live.
Yeah. And the crisis you're referring to, of course, happened around 2003, 2004, when you kind of went on hiatus because you didn't know what was wrong with you. You had all these physical symptoms, tired, fatigue, feelings, problems with your voice, and it was a mystery for a long time before, of course, you were diagnosed with Lyme disease.
Exactly. So my voice was just giving away, just randomly. I had no control of the airflow. And there was no way that I was going to be able to continue with a career as a recording artist and a performer. So I finally, after much effort and many, many grieving years of believing that I would never sing again to a satisfying level, I finally found someone that had an option I was ready to try. And because I was able to sing a couple of things throughout those years, but the effort, like to do the Michael Bublé Christmas duet, I had to start singing that a week prior, like all day, just to record one song. how can I ever do a whole album like this? I can't. There's no way of sustaining this. So, and I realized that. But what I did realize was that it was there in there somewhere. It just took more than I could muster to actually carry on with my career in reality. So, all right. So years of that, finding out what was actually wrong, that the nerves were damaged, and there was a procedure I could have done. I took the risk, went, I had the open throat surgery, and it gave me a different voice back, but a voice that allows me to do the things I want to do and enjoy. So you know what? I'm so celebrating that. I'm celebrating. This is not like tragedy to triumph. This is just forget about the tragedy and just focus on the triumph and just focus on celebrating this fabulous thing that I have. And it's a great reset, and it's overshadowed my fears.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Shania tells us about her new album, Queen of Me, and how she uses songwriting as self-help therapy. Stay with us. I'm Guy Raz, and you're listening to The Great Creators. Hey, welcome back to The Great Creators. I'm Guy Raz. Here's more from my conversation with Shania Twain.
Yeah, Shania, I'm curious because there are so many reasons for you to have written songs that were difficult or tragic or painful. I mean, you had a very difficult upbringing as a child, and you've talked about the abuse that you experienced and that you witnessed. Of course, you went through a challenging and painful divorce, and yet your music is generally, I mean, in general, it is uplifting, and so much of your music is danceable or, very much relatable. Tell me how you think about crafting a song. I mean, obviously you've made so many hits, and I gather that you can't always know what song is going to be a hit, but you have to have some hunch because you've had a lot of hits. And so when you sit down to think of a song and whether that song is going to land, how do you do that?
I mean, there's a lot of factors. Obviously, experience. I've been writing since I was 10 years old. So just doing it and doing it and doing it, learning from my mentors and observing and studying how their songs are written, various ways that people write songs. There's so many different approaches. There's so many contributing factors that make a song a hit. But my intentions behind making music and writing songs is to inspire, the same way it is to share my challenges in life. I only share them to inspire and maybe, inspire self-empowerment in other people. And the songwriting for me, even if sometimes I'm initially drawing from feeling melancholy or reflecting on something hurtful in my life, I often take those songs and turn them around and to cheer myself up. It's like this self-help exercise. I'm just like, okay, enough of that. Let's get happy and let's see the positive side of this. Let's focus on the success and I guess just focus on the joy of optimism and how powerful that is. And so many of my songs just go to that happy place because I'm myself trying to stay inspired.
Tell me about this new record, Queen of Me. I mean, you already have, I think, a pretty big TikTok hit on your hands for sure with Giddy Up. I've seen it all over TikTok. And I'm curious, that song is so catchy and danceable. And of course, we now today know that TikTok is a huge engine for music. It's what how people discover music. Did you think about that when you were writing that song?
No, I wasn't specifically thinking about TikTok. I'll tell you what brought me into that song is because this whole album was written during COVID. I was definitely going, into quiet, alone spaces with my guitar and deliberately writing myself into a cheerful attitude. And I'm like, okay, literally, I was saying, I have to get the pep back in my step. I've got to get the spice back in my life. I mean, where is my mojo? I'm like, spending more of my days and my time concerned about my family, the world, so many unanswered questions. I'm confused and I'm bored too. I'm, not as, active. We're in isolation, we're in lockdown, all of that stuff. So I literally said to myself, I haven't felt giddy in way too long. Like just a simple giddiness, like this giddy kind of silly, laughing, smiling place. And so I said, well, now the songwriter starts coming into it. I'm like, it's time to put some up in my giddy. Like, giddy up, get to it. Get to it. Just do it. So, and then, so I'm like, now I want to share that sentiment and I want to cheer people up as I'm trying to do to my own self. And I'm putting a song together before you know it. So it's, you got to put some up in your giddy up, get to it.
How is it writing for you now? This is your second record that you've written, I believe, since your partnership with Mutt. And how is your process different in the way you approach music, if at all?
Well, the songwriting is the same. It always starts with me and my guitar, or maybe, clinking a melody out on the piano, but it's always a solitary experience. And the difference between the two albums, the Now album was me really needing to express pain and things that I needed to overcome and things that I was in the process of overcoming, that I could see the light, but I was still on my way. And, I was using a lot of minor chords and really indulging in those emotions. And I love that record for that. Like, I love listening back to it. It reminds me of, how I was using songwriting to rise up out of something. And it just feels really satisfying to listen to it. Every word, every chord was so personal, and I made it deliberately a very independent exercise to do as much of the album, all of the writing myself, and work with a producer that would allow me to be part of the process of the production. So that was very important. And then, of course, with Queen of Me, I'm like, all right, I am so into celebrating where I am, where we are now coming out of COVID. We've all experienced so much. I felt a sense of unity in the world, as much as divided as the world is in so many other ways. I think that experiencing such traumatic threat to the human population is a great equalizer. And I felt that energy a lot. And that encouraged me, and I wanted to write inspiring music and lift myself up and write something cheery. So I ended up writing a very, very danceable, and I made it a goal to make myself smile and laugh through writing the album. If I thought, if I can make myself laugh, that's the right lyric.
You've made 5 studio albums. Obviously, you've appeared on other albums and have released other material, but 5 studio albums. And every time I've read an interview where somebody's asked you, why so few or whatever, your response is, because I want to produce something excellent. I'm not going to just put something out there for the sake of putting it out there. It has to be to my standard. And obviously, you've had massive success with all of these studio albums. Do you, with this record, Queen of Me, I mean, one could say, well, Shania Twain has nothing to prove. I mean, she's one of the best-selling artists, full stop, in history, and there's nothing for her to prove. But do you still feel a pressure that you put on yourself to create something excellent that will be seen and heard and regarded as excellent?
Always. I will always expect it to be excellent. To my own, whatever I can, however much excellence that I can achieve, I will definitely do that. Because when I decide to share something and people are going to then engage in sharing Two, it matters. It's the whole point. I've written so much music, though, now. Like, part of my reason for not being able to make records more quickly is just the songwriting. It takes time. And because I'm such a dominant songwriter in everything that I record, it's kind of like, hand sewing. It's just slower. It's this handmade, everything handmade and personal just takes more time. It's more time consuming. But during COVID, I wrote a good 3 albums worth of music because I had so much time on my hands. And I was very productive and very inspired. So now I expect to have, when the tour is done, I'm getting back into the studio and I want to get to these songs that are already there.
Wow.
Just waiting.
3 albums worth. Incredible.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited.
When you think about, there was a point not too long ago, or maybe, about 20 years ago, where you thought maybe your career was over. And what a great career would have been at that point, multi-platinum selling artist, right? You could have retired and of course you may have had to because of your voice and your condition, but of course you recovered from it, and here you are now having released your 5th studio album, you're singing. When you think about where you're headed and what you want to be doing in 20 years from now, is it more of this? Is it performing? Is it making records?
I will always be writing music or writing something. I'm a creative writer. That is really at the root of things. And because I'm so in love with music, it tends to be on the musical side of things. I would love to be able to write out of my own vocal style for other artists. That is something I will do forever. I'm just going to build up that catalog. Music I'm never letting go of. It's there. It's what I love. And whether it's just to listen or to create, it's part of my greatest joy, and it's my immediate mood injection. It is instant and fabulous. So I need it. I guess I could say I'm addicted to it. There you go. I'm addicted to music. I can't live without it. And I just want to be healthy in 20 years from now. I want to still be riding horses, and I want to be maybe a grandmother someday. So there's a lot of wonderful things to look forward to and a lot of reasons to stay mentally and physically healthy and productive.
That's Shania Twain. Shania's latest album is Queen of Me, and her tour kicked off in April. She's playing 76 shows across the U.S. and Canada. Go to thegreatcreators.com/Twain to find links from this episode, including some of Shania's earliest songs and the music video for Giddy Up. And you can find all of our episodes at thegreatcreators.com. Hey, thanks so much for listening to our episode this week. Please do make sure you hit the follow button in your podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, it's a plus sign in the upper right corner. In Spotify, just tap follow. This episode was produced by Nat Hoops and edited by Jeff Rogers. Thanks also to Kevin Leahy, Elaine Coates, Jenna Gedman, and Daniel Shukin. I'm Guy Raz, and you've been listening to The Great Creators from Built It Productions.